Good morning, everyone, and welcome. Today is Monday, January 22nd, 2024. This is our morning work session, and our topic today is the American Rescue Plan Act, an update, our quarterly update. My name is John Kafalis, County Commissioner, joined by Commissioner Shattuck McNally, and Commissioner Stevens will not be joining us today. We also have our County Manager, Lorenda Volker. Welcome back, Lorenda. Nice to see you. At this time, I'll turn it over to Lorenda in case you want to make some comments, and then we'll turn it over, I believe, to our Director, Josh Fudge.
Thank you very much and good morning. This is our periodic update on what is happening with the ARPA funding. So you'll have, it's a pretty, looks like hopeful agenda. There are quite a few items to go through today. So Josh is going to try to keep us moving so that we can provide updates on many of these items. Some exciting things to report, some good news that has happened, and then a few questions about direction. So Josh, I'll hand it off to you.
Thanks, Lorenda. Good morning, Josh.
Good morning, Josh Fudge, Director of Performance, Budget, and Strategy. As Lorenda mentioned, there's quite a few significant items on the agenda today, so I'm going to jump right in with our first topic, which is the project parking lot. We are getting down fairly close to allocating out the full amount of the funds we've been provided through the State and Local Fiscal Recovery Fund, or American Rescue Plan Act. And so on this slide here, you see the items that are on the parking lot. That top list are things that we believe we received direction back in November to go ahead with, but we weren't quite sure, so we wanted to make sure we're on the right track with that. These three projects add up to $1.6 million and include lot acquisition for a project with Habitat for Humanity and the Poudre School District, $100,000 for repairs to the Virginia Dale Clubhouse, and $500,000 for Realities for Children. And then the remaining list adds up to about $20.6 million, has a number of projects on it. And I will be happy to turn it over to Laura Walker, our Human and Economic Health Director, for further description or answer questions about these projects.
Thank you, Josh. Welcome, Lorenda, or excuse me, Laura. Is there anything you would like to add at this time?
I don't think so, unless there are questions from the board about these items. The remaining parking lot section on this slide, I will be going into more detail with the commissioners at a retreat later this month, because there are a couple of new ones that you have not seen. And so the other thing that I'll be asking for direction later this month or into February maybe is, when will it be time to close the parking lot to put the barricades up? Because I just want to be clear with partners out in the community about whether or not opportunities still exist for any of these funds, or if they're going to be fully allocated fairly soon. So
Thank you, Laura. Commissioner?
Thank you, Laura. And I think, as I understand, maybe this remaining parking lot for discussion is already kind of over what we have available. Is that correct?
Correct. They add up to about $20.6 million. And as you might see on the next slide, there's about $16.4 million available in that bucket for all those projects.
And so I'm curious if, and I know there's a couple others, but maybe there's just a tentative kind of, since we're out public, that maybe there is starting to be up a closed sign on, or temporary closed sign on the parking lot, just because I don't know how, we're going to have some hard decisions already. I don't know how my colleague feels. And of course, we don't have our colleague Commissioner Stevens here. I hope she feels better soon. I'm just wondering if we should go ahead and start talking that way, because I don't know how we're going to add more to the list and have to have those conversations further challenged with hard decisions. I think it's a good thing to kind of start maybe messaging that it's parking lot is kind of full.
absolutely. And my assumption was that some of these final decisions are coming quickly. I'm under that impression from what I know the county manager and our budget director, performance strategy, sorry, I don't know all the parts of your job title, I'm not used to it yet, I'm sorry. But anyway, that's the purpose of having this retreat later in the month, I think, is to finalize direction from the board to staff around these issues. So I think if I know an answer within the next few weeks, I think that would be sufficient for me to make sure that the community is aware that this initiative is coming to a close.
And I'll just add that regarding what I understood from our Director of Performance Budget and Strategy, confirming direction to proceed with those 3 items in the parking lot, I imagine at the retreat we'll need to do a final confirmation with all 3 of us present. But my recollection of our previous discussion is that those 3 items were a high priority for funding. And so from one commissioner, my direction is that I'm hoping we can agree to support those 3 particular projects. The Habitat for Humanity, which is part of the Hartside Hill housing, affordable housing development, Virginia Dale, and Realities for Children. Thank you.
So Commissioners, we were pretty confident that you all gave clear direction for these 3, but we wanted to make sure in a public meeting that we really documented that for the public to hear, that these were the 3 priorities that you most recently allocated. That's why they're here. We're 99% sure. We just want to be 100% sure before we go forward.
Great. Commissioner?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Yeah, I would say that we've had that conversation. I don't know if they were a high priority for me, but they were on the list that I felt comfortable moving forward at these allocations. And so I would say that's where I'm at, is that I wouldn't say it's my highest priority, but I think all of these would be hard for me to put as high or not high, but I think those were the ones that we had come to consensus to move forward on. So that's my recollection, so.
Thank you for that. That really helps us to go forward with these 3 particular items, and then we'll have a deeper discussion about the many things in the parking lot, and have you provide some guidance on how you'd like to go forward with those at the retreat.
Thank you, colleagues. I believe we can proceed to the next slide.
All right.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. So the next item is an update on the Community Justice Alternatives project renovation that is being partially funded with these ARPA dollars. And for that, I'll turn it over to our Facilities Director, Ken Cooper.
Morning, Commissioners. I also have David Bragg, our Senior Construction Manager, here in case there are questions about the project. But you'll recall that the alternative sentencing project was wrapped up mid-2023. That allowed us to vacate the women's wing at Community Corrections, which also allowed us to go in and make some pretty significant improvements and capital renewal to a much-needed area. That building has been around and takes a lot of abuse, honestly, but certainly a lot of use and a lot of good use over there. And so we were very excited to get in there and show what these dollars could do. You'll recall that the commissioners had approved 3.3, sorry, in ARPA funding to advance that capital renewal project. And we were able to find a few more dollars to supplement it, some from risk management. We were able to do some ADA compliance projects that have been on that list from the original Meeting the Challenge list from several years ago. So we picked off a few of those. We also found some dollars in the Facilities Component Replacement Fund to augment what your board approved. It included pretty significant improvements in the restrooms, including some of the ADA work that happened in those restrooms. We did LED lighting throughout it, throughout the new space, right, or the renewed space. The project is pretty much wrapped up. Furniture is going in now, and we do have some rooftop units that are expected to be delivered and then installed, high-efficiency units that'll happen in April. So those will lag behind a little bit in terms of the timing. Josh will show you here with the slides. Some decisions on how much to spend are hard. This one wasn't. This is the kind of before and after with some shower space. You can see that some of those were pretty rough, and you can see side by side, what we're able to improve. And again, some of that was ADA, but primarily it was just, building environment that really was long overdue. And we were very grateful to get the money to make that happen. Yeah, Commissioner.
Yes, Commissioner.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you, Ken. I appreciate the picture. It's a very dramatic change. So I'm assuming, just from my seeing the picture up close, the very farthest shower stall is the one that doesn't have the tray that they could maybe get into with the handle, that it would be ADA, that it didn't have that tray lip on there, or edge, I guess, maybe?
Correct.
Okay, thank you.
And some of the grab bars that you mentioned there too were part of the ADA additions as well, so. The next slide shows just some general office space, some of the hallway spaces that we're able to get updated. And we actually hoped that we would find really strongly hoped that we would find kind of the culprit for what has been a long-term concern with lint that gets through that building. And we did a pretty exhaustive look at that. As it turned out, we didn't find kind of the smoking gun in that, unfortunately, but we certainly are assured that it wasn't what we thought it might be, for years of that. And we haven't seen, continued problems of it. So we're hopeful that, that's been resolved as well. The last slide just shows one of the client sort of break area spaces. And again, a very nice upgrade, nice set of updates to the overall environment over there. And again, we're nearly complete and grateful for the opportunity we had to not only complete the basically doubling the space at alternative sentencing, but also making these changes as well. And again, because of the change at ASD, it vacated that space and made the project really doable and without tons of disruption for the folks at Community Corrections. So, any questions about any of that? Yeah, Commissioner.
Thank you, Ken. Well done. Congratulations to you, David, and your facilities team. Commissioner, do you have any additional questions, comments, or observations?
Not at this time, sir.
Great. Thanks a lot, Ken.
Thank you.
The next item is an update on the projects for the Natural Resources Department and a proposal to reallocate some of the funds that had been previously allocated. There's just under $2 million allocated to projects in natural resources, primarily for water-related items. And so I will turn it over to Megan Flanagan from the Department of Natural Resources to walk through this item.
Thanks, Josh. Good morning. And with me today are John Plybon and Dalen Figgs, if there's any more specific questions I can't answer. A brief update are that 3 of the projects that were funded through ARPA dollars are on track for construction this year. The first are the vault toilet upgrade to a flush toilet system at Horsetooth Reservoir. This toilet will actually also be combined with a project we have to improve our decon station for aquatic nuisance species. So it's all in the same hub there. Up at Hermit Park Open Space, we'll be updating the wastewater treatment system on site there, tying all the buildings into a leach-filled septic type system. And then at Carter Lake, we will be updating the wastewater treatment system there. And that's one I'll talk about in a minute, where we have some proposed modifications. We initially, during the feasibility assessment of this project, the idea was to put the existing dump station at Carter Lake for RV vehicles to be able to dump their waste water into, move that into a leach field type septic system. But during the feasibility assessment, it was determined that there really was not a suitable site or location on site that didn't adversely impact our visiting public. And maybe more importantly, the return on investment for this upgrade to the system would have exceeded the lifespan of the actual system. So instead, what we're proposing to do is upgrade and adapt the existing 4 dump stations within our system. There's 1 at Carter Lake, 2 at Horsetooth Reservoir, and 1 at Hermit Park Open Space. Convert all those to have accessibility improvements, add some signage, and then an addition of a pay-as-you-go type system. And that's very common. In fact, we're the only system in the area that is not a pay-as-you-go. We reached out to our camping public and got 90% positive response on the desire to keep those systems and willingness to pay a fee for that. So we'll come back to you at a separate time about the possibility of adding a fee there. But we'd like to convert the $660,000 intended for the Carter Lake system to make those retrofits across the system. And we think we'll see a substantial savings in doing so, about $600,000 savings. And then in 2025, the remaining two projects, the well upgrade at Hermit Park Open Space, that's in that larger group use area, is on track, as is the swim beach improvements on the east side of Carter Lake. So what we wanted to propose as modifications, given we may see a 600,000 or greater savings from some of the existing projects, and some of it's a little unknown, we haven't gone out to bid. But we'd like to get your feedback and direction around shifting those, if we see overages, to going to cover any overage on another existing ARPA project. So if we see some of those come back in a little higher as we go out to bid, we would first cover any overage there. But if we have additional savings after that, we have 3 capital improvement projects already on our identified capital improvement plan in the department that have not gone out to bid yet, but will soon. And we'd like to be able to adjust that money because they have a water or equity nexus. One could be the Poudre River Trail. We plan to take that out to bid this spring. If we start to see some overage in that budget, once it's actually, we get those bids back, moving some of the funds to that project. The Pleasant Valley Trail is the westernmost segment of the Poudre River Trail. It goes out to LaPorte and connects that community. It's a safe route to school, and it's seeing some cracking. We need to do some repairs there. So that would be another option. And then at Chimney Hollow Open Space, seeing some cuts to our general fund dollars. We took those out of our CIP. And one area we had to reduce, in addition to our asphalt budget, was some of the capital improvements into the future at Chimney Hollow Open Space. And one way we thought we could replace it with ARPA funds would be an ADA accessible boat dock at that location. And then the last priority on the list, if there's still savings at that point, would be, we've been doing a lot of work around activating equity. You know, we have the backpack program, you guys, the Commissioners Help Fund. We've been working with some of the community members around equitable access to our properties for people, maybe underserved community or people with different abilities. And so to continue to do that in a meaningful way with some funds to help match.
Thank you very much, Megan. Commissioner, do you have questions? Yes.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you, Dalen and Megan. I appreciate you bringing up that Pleasant Valley Trail repairs. I actually had a long conversation with a longtime resident from LaPorte who had concerns about mobility challenges or safety on County Road 54G. So I think this is great. I know that was something I had brought up and had a couple of conversations with multiple individuals, including Saturday was Safe Route to Schools on Country Club Road came up again. So not to laugh, but it's just interesting. They're all kind of happening at the same time. So I am in support of your proposed modifications and proposal, and thank you for continuing the work with equity. I think that's really important, and I really am grateful you're advancing that swim beach at Carter Lake, because I know it's something that is well needed. So I'm in full support of all your recommendations and acts. Thank you.
Thanks, Commissioner. And just to make sure I heard correctly, what you're suggesting, Megan, and Natural Resources team, is that savings, for example, from the 660,000 wastewater system work, where there might be $600,000 in savings, as you described, using those funds to address any overages in some of these projects and any other ARPA projects. Is that correct?
Yeah, that would be our first priority. And it could be more than 600,000 if some of the other projects, once we put them out to bid, like the Carter Lake East side, if that comes back a little lower, overages from any of the projects. First put it into other ARPA projects, and then next prioritize the listed projects on the slides.
Thank you. Yes, I am also in support of these proposed modifications. They seem reasonable, and logical. Thank you.
Great, thank you very much.
Moving right along. So we do have some pretty significant updates related to broadband projects and the funds that have been allocated to that. And so I will turn this over to our Support Services Director, Mark Pfaffinger.
Hello, Board. Thank you for having me. We'll start with, I guess, some of the most exciting news. We've received 7 of the 9 grant applications we partnered with our community partners, Loveland and Fort Collins. We received funding for 7 of the 9 project proposals we put forth. There was one additional project that Estes Park put forth that was not selected also, but of that, we're receiving about $14 million in broadband expansion, which will cover approximately 2,000 households additional in our county that have underserved or very terrible internet connectivity. So that's pretty exciting. I will go into those projects in a little more detail. I thought I'd start with the very high level first. I'm very excited about capital projects, but I'm always looking forward to the next thing. We're not done yet, and so I'm trying to keep my eye on what's available. And the big news is Colorado's approaching their BEAD grant process. So that's part of the Infrastructure and Jobs Act. Colorado's received $826 million specifically for broadband. Well, I got a little ahead of myself. There was a change in the Capital Projects Fund grant. I think we've discussed this through email, but originally there was 167 or so million that was earmarked for capital projects. Our understanding was that was going to broadband projects. When the awards came out, they awarded 113 million, and we found out that about 50 was taken out of that fund in order to fund the Ridgeview campus for one of the governor's priorities. It took a lot of us a little by surprise. We have had subsequent follow-ups on a couple of our projects. They scored 1 point below getting funded 2 of the projects that we submitted. There's a pretty good chance we could have at least got one of those projects if there was additional funding in the grant. So if something should happen to the Ridgeview campus project, our understanding is that funding may come back to broadband projects, but we just kind of have to wait and see what happens there. Were there any questions about that process?
I don't have any. Commissioner, do you have any questions or thoughts?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I just want to say congratulations, thank you. That was one of the best emails I got for the beginning of the year. Something that, I've been trying to champion and looking to expand this throughout the county, as I'm still underserved, and I know my neighbors and some of the small businesses around my neighborhood are still not getting adequate broadband and access. So I know there's a lot that you have done and your team has done in our partnership, the No-Ko-Fi Alliance has done to advocate for this, and I really think it's our collective partnership and alliance that has really shown through, and I just want to congratulate you because I know this was a lot of work and a lot of time and a lot of expertise you have shared and given to this endeavor, and I just want to thank you, Mark, and congratulate you on 7 out of the 9. Thank you.
Thanks, yeah, very exciting. So again, pushing forward to BEAD, that's our next big target. A couple things that have happened in that, Colorado has already submitted their second version of their grant application to the NTIA. The first revision was accepted, so what that allowed them to do is move towards what's called a eligible location map challenge process. That map challenge process is underway right now. As a county, we are submitting projects that you have funded through ARPA that aren't showing up on their map as to be ineligible, so they're trying to remove those from eligible locations on the map. But that's a fairly quick process. We're almost done with that. That will end at the end of the month. Then the final maps will be released, which show, with the BEAD, there's specifically eligible and ineligible households across the state. And I'll show you a map here in a minute. One of the big things we've been advocating for the last couple of years, I gotta say, is that unlicensed wireless and DSL service would be considered unserved within the BEAD program and make any household that's only served primarily by those two technologies under BEAD are now considered eligible for grant funding, which is very exciting. So Commissioner Shattuck, I think your house is one of those houses that is dealing with, it's better than nothing. We got to thank all of our wireless providers up till now that have kind of filled this niche, but it's not a long-term solution. We're starting to see a lot of issues with the technology reaching its end of life. So the good news is many households that prior may have been considered already served by wireless technology that is unlicensed wireless are now eligible for funding.
Thank you, Mark, and I speak for the nonprofits and small businesses in my neighborhood that are been struggling for a long time, but I'm curious, can you explain to me what licensed point-to-point versus unlicensed, what does that mean? Because there is now all of a sudden a plethora of folks who have shown up from all parts of the country in the area that I'm not sure who determines who's licensed and what's licensed, and how does that apply to this? Thank you.
In short, most of the maps are being generated from the FCC's broadband maps that have been worked on over the last year and a half, 2 years. They're self-reported by the companies who provide technology. In short, a licensed wireless provider, someone who's registered their bandwidth through the FCC. So they're typically cellular providers. So if you're being served by T-Mobile home hotspot, that's a licensed frequency. There's very few of our point-to-point wireless providers that are spending the money to obtain FCC frequencies to do licensed broadband. The county does licensed in areas of public safety, as an example, where we have a reserved frequency within a licensed bandwidth that we've registered with the FCC and paid the funding for. The majority of our point-to-point wireless providers that are serving households are unlicensed wireless providers. They're all competing in the same bandwidth, like the 5.7 range of gigahertz. They're all kind of working the same, which is why you see a lot of contention in the wireless area. Did that kind of answer the question?
Absolutely, thank
Okay.
you.
We believe these applications for BEAD will be opening this summer. We're expecting a 25% match requirement. We have done some initial calculations based on the eligibility. You'll see on this map here on the right. This shows the breakdown of our number of households. We have somewhere around 135,000 households in Larimer County. Of those, about 115 are considered already served. Thanks to Connection Pulse, Trailblazer, others that are already in the market, those are fully served residences. When you're starting to get to the unfunded, unserved, and these unserved categories, that's where our numbers are we're looking at those, what's eligible for grant funds. So when we add those up, the ones that we can actually apply for grants for, we're in this 90 to 125 million range for all of the unserved households and underserved households left within the FCC maps.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So I'm trying to do my math quick in my head, which is probably not a good thing for a Monday morning. It looks like over 10% of our is it more than 10% of our households are not served? Is that accurate? Is that be
Yes,
a
I thought I
fair
wrote-
assessment?
I believe it's around 14,000 homes,
Yeah, so it'd be
13,000.
a little
So
over. Okay,
it's about 10% still left.
a little over. Okay, that's what I was doing my math. So okay, thank you.
Yep.
I'd like to ask a question,
Yes,
if I
sir.
may. I seem to recall when we began this broadband journey years back, folks like Drew Davis and others, I thought one estimate for what we needed to make sure that everyone had proper, reliable, and affordable coverage was about 225 or 250 million. Can you help with the math there? Have we chipped away at that, or have we adjusted that estimate in terms of overall what are the dollar resources that we need to get everyone, 100% or as the governor likes to say, 99% coverage in Larimer County.
Yeah, these are high-level numbers, but the number was around 200 million. It was actually quite a bit higher, but there was, let's say, a couple dozen households that were over 300,000 per household to serve, and we realized those weren't viable projects. So we drew the line at about 200 million. As a community, we have been chipping away at that. So some of our providers like Comcast have actually expanded into some areas that were unserved originally. The commissioners through other ARPA projects, which I'll touch in a minute, have chipped away at a decent number of that as well. And I would say with the 14 million in grant funding, that's another chunk. There still could be some small pockets that we're not representing properly because the FCC maps are only as good as the FCC maps. Unfortunately, I have to go by those because that's the only way that we can calculate funding right now. I think there's probably a percentage of the FCC map data that's a little bit inaccurate in showing, let's say, DSL or other served areas that are a little bit on the fringe of underserved. So that's probably 25 million of additional projects, but probably it's not realistic for us to deal with that at the moment.
Thank you, Mark.
So just in summary, in order to go after this grant, you need to be thinking in your head, as a community, we have to come up with somewhere between 22 and $30 million in matching funds. We're not sure if some of that can be in-kind funds like we were able to do with capital grants, but that's kind of your worst case number there. I will remind you that with any funds that we should put into this program, we already have the revenue sharing agreements, and we will recoup those monies over probably, it looks like it less than 10 years. Because we're only paying for 25% of the project, we're looking at 8 to 10 years to recover any funds that get put in as matching grants. So it's a lot easier to recover your money when you're only paying for 25% of the project, but you're still getting 25% of the revenue share on the monthly service fees. From some of the other projects we've recently completed, we're actually exceeding our numbers of folks that have been signing up. I think when there's nothing better, you get a really high take rate, it's called, in areas that are really poorly served. So we're always trying to be a little conservative on our estimates, but I feel confident that within 10 years, you would have the monies fully paid back, anything you invested into the BEAD grant program. Okay?
Yes, Commissioner.
Mark, thank you for that update. That actually is really encouraging because I think we were looking at 20 before. So these are things that will come back into our general fund or something to be used as future boards or wish to either apply to furthering the goal or to other things. So I think this is really good investment and return on investment for our taxpayers. And I think I'm really excited. I'm glad that we've been making some, I think, significant progress on reaching out to close our digital divide and provide some digital equity. So again, thank you and congratulations.
Welcome. So again, we are investigating funding options, trying to get creative where we have to, but it might be something you stick on your parking lot as an area where you can recoup. If you did put 25 million into, let's say, BEAD, you would see about 2.5 million a year in revenue to put into other programs over 10 years. There's other ways to think about you're investing, but you're going to get a revenue back that you can then put into other programs if you want to spread that out over time. So those are just some creative ways to think about it. I think we can go ahead and move on. Just real high level again, this is the CPF awards. Those red dots show all the areas, which I have a better map coming up. This is the project total number of locations by those household areas. Some of the ones that are more noteworthy, there's a good area of Red Feather Lakes that we're looking to do. It doesn't involve much of Crystal Lakes. Crystal Lakes would be something we would go after for BEAD if we want to keep extending the network up towards Crystal Lakes. An area of Risk Canyon to start filling in a lot of those unserved households in the Risk Canyon that experience a lot of fire damage. Rustic to Colorado State Mountain Campus, so that's pretty exciting. We actually fill some of the upper Poudre Canyon and all the way in, and we're actually partnering with CSU. They're already excited about buying service from Connection in order to feed the Mountain Campus. 2 areas of Loveland are the Hidden Valley Estates area, which is a very small neighborhood. Actually kind of surprised this project was selected. I think they just had a little bit of leftover money. So good news for that community. And then Pole Hill, which is above the Thompson Canyon, very hard to reach, has a lot of issues with public safety, so this will really help their communications network up there. Loveland Pulse also Pooter Park. A portion of the Pooter Canyon, which you know is very lacking of any kind of service. So we'll be actually having additional conversations with FirstNet and some of the wireless providers to see if they might want to partner to increase wireless coverage up the Pooter Canyon, the lower Pooter Canyon. Lastly, we also partnered, Nunn Telephone asked us for a letter of support to extend their network into the northeast portion of Larimer County that they serve, a little bit of their electric utility. Good news is they're going to be able to finish their electric utility network, about 100 households up there getting fiber. The projects that weren't selected were Pinewood Springs, Masonville to Carter Lake, which included one of our commissioners' houses. Unfortunately, it was not selected, and West Berthoud. Those were actually highly ranked projects. We just didn't make the funding cutoff. Okay. This is a little hard to see, but I think in your printout, you'll see the bead map, which shows eligible locations. If you see these pockets of red, Crystal Lakes is a good example. There's portions of farther out past Risk Canyon. There's a number of red dots there. There's these areas up by Waverly that have a lot of red dots that are unserved. Those are your eligible households under the BEAD program that we could potentially bring good connectivity into finally into our community. Some of these like purplish dots, those are the ones that were funded through the Capital Projects Fund. I think I missed that on my legend, sorry about that. But that also gives you a little view into some of those households. That's some of the Nunn Telephone project is up here in this top right corner. I'm sorry, yeah.
Yes, Commissioner.
Thank you. Mark, I'm also curious about around Waverly and north of Wellington. There's lots of red dots there. Would that, some of the work that we're doing with the DOLA grant help kind of providing some a middle mile or some opportunities to come and maybe any of those projects on the list to kind of increase access for Wellington and that area? Just curious about that.
Somewhat. We're actually, the portion that we're doing to get to our new landfill, we're actually connecting that with a partnership with Poudre Valley Rural Electric. They already have fiber that goes along Owl Canyon, close to Highway, County Road 9, I believe it is. And we'll be leasing fiber from them. They have a very good community rate for government, so we're partnering with them to lease fiber. But we would have to extend fiber north to get into areas of Waverly. We are also there are quite a few interested households that have been seeing the work we're doing on County Road 7 that are very eager to also get fiber from this project as well. As you know, there's a lot of households up in those areas that are underserved. So yes, the work we're doing will help, but there's still a lot of middle mile that we have to complete as part of BEAD.
Thank you. Appreciate that.
And then the second one is sort of more of the southern portion. And you can see, wow, there's a lot to the west of Loveland. Commissioner Shattuck McNally, we don't need to tell you about that. You know all about these. These are your neighbors, and they are primarily served by point-to-point wireless. Excellent news is they're now eligible. And I think they could compete really favorably for projects, so we're excited to potentially be able to move forward with those.
And I can say my neighbors and some of those community groups have been very vocal in the last year or so when they started hearing more about these projects and kind of raising their hand, and what about us? Because really, if you look at that, even just west of the city lines for Loveland,
Yep.
that's where the red starts. So, I mean, it's so close to Pulse. So I just want the public to know there are a lot of folks in those neighborhoods that I'm starting to hear a lot from. And this is on the way up to Carter Lake and that neighborhood too. And so I don't know,
Yep.
you know, it's
All that.
also, it's public safety. There's a lot there for people with the high risk for wildfire, and there's just a lot happening there. So I just appreciate you.
Yep.
I know sometimes they still, that those folks that have been calling me, emailing me, contacting me, sometimes they still feel a little forgotten because, you know, they're so close to the city limits, so.
Yeah, as you can see, we're actually picking off harder projects right now. It's unfortunately the way these grant programs have been run. They want you to go to the most unserved places first. But the people that are caught in the middle, like this whole area near Carter Lake, to the east of Carter Lake, to the west of Loveland, I would say west of Berthoud, there's a lot of pockets of very poor service. Pinewood Springs is another area served by only wireless providers. So the way the grants have gone, we've kind of had to pick off these harder projects first. And then hopefully BEAD will allow us to come back and actually make all of this green. That would be exciting. That would be obviously the goal, I think. Okay? Okay. The last thing was just we just did a quick update on our funds, where we currently stand. We've been tracking all of our projects and what you've currently allocated towards broadband. Not all of our projects were awarded as part of CPF, so we still have a little over 1.5 million sitting in our broadband fund that have been already awarded, or I would say approved and committed to projects. So those monies I will not need as part of CPF. So if you would like, we can hold on to those for BEAD, sit on those funds for BEAD matching funds. And then we're also working to reconcile a couple of these projects that are getting close to completion. I will mention one exciting project. The Ptarmigan neighborhood is done. They are, as of Monday, I think as of the end of last week, they're starting to put door hangers in the community, and they're eligible to start signing up for Pulse broadband. So maybe we'll have a ribbon cutting one of these days. We'll see. And we're getting close on a couple other designs. One is the Imperial Estates area, kind of to the southwest of Fort Collins. We're also looking at a couple potential mobile home parks right now. We're still working with Connection on right of entry. And once we get those, I can bring updates to the board. And we're doing final designs with engineering for approvals of the Namaqua area, so Paul's can start construction there. And so there's a lot going on, and I got to say, the one thing that really turned out to be a great foreshadow was spending money on our middle mile projects with Poudre Valley Rural Electric. The money we put into the Masonville line and what we're currently funding to get to Rustic, those funds were eligible for in-kind fund contributions and met our match. So actually prepaying for those, we didn't have to fund that additional money in our CPF grant. So good work. Thank you for supporting those projects. They really positioned us to move forward and put us in a great position in those rural areas to bring better service. That's all I have.
Again, thank you, Mark. Thank you for sharing good news. Commissioner, questions, comments, observations, and then I have a bit of a question.
Okay.
Just one thing, and I'm trying not to be picky, but Namaqua, I see it's misspelled. It's N-A, not N-E.
Yep,
A couple
you're right.
times.
It is.
And since that's where my kids went to schools, Namaqua Elementary, kind of have that imprinted on my brain. Thanks for the update on the Ptarmigan. That's now helping us get up to help increase access to Timnath. And just thinking back when we first looked at this and that $200 million number and just wondering how we'd ever wrangle this, just seeing this progress is really uplifting and inspiring and heartening. So I just want to say again, thanks and congratulations. And I'm grateful for all these folks, because I know a lot of these people have been struggling having equity and digital access, and especially all those students and who haven't had the same learning opportunities as their colleagues at school. And then also for public safety issue, a lot of these are really important neighborhoods to have connected. So I have to say, just well done and thank you so much, and let's keep working. Thank you.
You're welcome.
So, yes, this is good news, and in particular, it's great to learn that the Middle Mile project up the Red Feather Lakes Road is complete. Good collaboration with Poudre Valley REA and some of the other Middle Mile projects, collaboration with Colorado State University, the Mountain Campus, and Glacier View to Rustic, and making all those connections, the Upper Poudre Canyon. All those are tremendous accomplishments, and some are complete, some are in progress. My question there, it's a two-part question, I believe, and that is, you mentioned a moment ago, Mark, about putting up door hangers in certain areas. When will we be ready to put door hangers up at the homes and the properties along 74E? I mean, some of those 7 out of 9 grants, those capital project funds, aren't they going to try to connect homes with the middle mile? Can you help me with that, please?
Sure. The grants that are, so the middle mile enabled us to apply for capital projects.
Yes,
So capital projects, I think at the end of this week is finished with the challenge process. That will initiate the contracting and grant funding. Once that's done, we can go into design and start construction in some of those neighborhoods. But it's going to take a couple of years, 2 to 3 years to complete Red Feather Lakes. It's a complex build. There's a lot of other agreements. We have to do pole attachment agreements with the rural electric. There's actually a couple sections of Forest Service we may have to cross. So realistically, I think the first people could be up and running within a year and a half, but it's going to take probably 3 years to complete that project in those more rural areas.
Great. Thank you for answering my question. And I guess in closing, before we move on to the next area, in addition to the comments made by Commissioner Shattuck McNally, this is really great, important. I would also offer that it also aligns well with our climate smart, future ready goals and our economic development goals, because again, more opportunities for folks to telecommute. It's a 28-mile drive from Livermore down to Fort Collins to go to work. So again, it aligns well with all the other things that we're doing at the county level. So we are grateful for that. And again, thanks to your team. You should go back to your office and thank them all for us, please. They've
Will
done
do.
extraordinary work.
Absolutely. We're very excited that we're getting some movement now, and all that pre-work over the last 5 years is starting to pay off. So thank you for your support.
Yes, I believe we're ready to move on, sir. Immediate needs grants.
So the immediate needs grants program is pretty much wrapping up. There are only 2 grantees that have not yet been fully reimbursed. One of those did expire at the end of the year, and we're just waiting for their final reimbursement for about $1,100 before the end of this month. And then the only other remaining project is the Latino Chamber of Commerce project that the Fort Collins Area Chamber of Commerce is setting up, and they have the remainder of this year to complete that. One thing, and I'll note more of it on the next slide, is that basically with this report to the U.S. Treasury Department for the end of the 4th quarter of 2023, that will be the last, or these grants will no longer be reimbursed directly from the Treasury Department and SLFRF. They will now be applied to lost revenue so that we can basically end the reporting process, if you will. As always, the reports and presentations for these grants are available on our website, and the address is there. Any questions about those?
I don't have any questions, Commissioner. I think at the end we'll shower you with accolades and things of that nature.
Sounds good. So the 4th quarter project and expenditure report will be submitted to the Treasury Department by the end of this month. It'll show that we spent $105,400 on eligible projects during the 4th quarter. That's all vicarious trauma in community justice alternatives. The sheriff inmate, the excess funding that goes to our contracted medical care provider to do testing and symptom monitoring, that actually is continuing in the jail. I've been asking them if that's about to wrap up, and because COVID is sticking around in the jail, they still need to do that. So that will continue probably about as long as it's needed. The district attorney prosecutor spent about $43,000. These will all also switch over to lost revenue funding, and then immediate needs grants, just under $11,000 were spent. So through the end of the 4th quarter 2023, as far as the Treasury Department is concerned, the county has spent 76% of our $69.3 million. 36.5 of that was in lost revenue. 8.1 million was in non-recyclable costs, and 7.8 million was for recyclable payroll costs. So payroll primarily in community justice alternatives and the sheriff. that we then will turn around and spend on other items such as broadband. When we calculate the lost revenue provision for calendar year 2023, we will only need about 16.9 million of whatever is calculated, and that will then be the final reportable expense to Treasury, and we'll, as far as Treasury is concerned, we will be done spending our funds and we will have reported on all of it. That then will be the time to decide if we want to allocate any of that to the Road and Bridge Fund. We would need to use Road and Bridge expenses to apply to that lost revenue, but this should be done probably in May. And as I mentioned, all current direct reimbursement projects will now switch to lost revenue, and the reports, these project and expenditure reports, are also on our website at that address.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. First, Josh, let me say thank you to you and your team. I know this reporting and expenditure report and has been a learning process, yearly or monthly. It seems like there's lots of tweaking. Of course, this is all unprecedented opportunities and funding. So I'm curious with this final report, well, two questions. First, how much has this been a lot of challenge, a lot of time for you and your team to kind of navigate this whole process? And once we do that final report, will there be any other reporting or anything else that we need to do after you said May is when our final report is?
Yeah, we should be able to finish our reporting for the second quarter of 2024. That'll be the lost revenue provision. After that, I don't know if reports are still required, but if they are, I can just say we're done and submit it, basically. It was a lot of time in the beginning. I'd say the first year and a half was a lot of time because there was so much that was being directly reported and reimbursed by the Treasury Department, the payroll costs, the immediate needs grants, getting those agreements set up and then reimbursed. As those things have fallen off, it's gotten much easier. It barely takes any time anymore. It'll take a few hours with the help of of finance to calculate lost revenue. But other than that, it's pretty much done. And the only other thing is keeping up on all the other projects such as broadband and the transformative projects that are being funded through lost revenue, just making sure we kind of know what those totals end up being so that we don't go over in any one area, and things like that. So it's gotten a lot easier than it was in the past. So thank you for asking that.
Thank you again for all that you do.
Thank you. So just going through our favorite pie charts, this just shows that of the $72.1 million that the county will have received through ARPA, that includes about $1.5 million in interest on these funds. All the current interest is going now to the general fund. The Local Assistance and Tribal Consistency Fund, $1.3 million, is that small purple slice. About $8.1 million is directly reported to SLFRF. The $7.8 million was recyclable. That's also reported directly to the Treasury Department, but then we can reallocate those funds. And then at the end of the day, about $53.5 million will have been the lost revenue provision. So we're very thankful for that. This chart is the same as one earlier in the presentation. That white slice there, $2.5 million, if from Mark's charts about the broadband financing, that's the match that's required for for one of the additional projects. There's about $200,000 required match for a project that can be absorbed because there was cost savings in other areas. $17.2 million has been spent, primarily on broadband and some of these transformative projects. $23.5 million has been allocated but not yet spent. That $1.6 million, the yellow slice you see there, that was for those 3 projects we mentioned at the beginning where we wanted to make sure we had direction. So that can now be considered gray. And then the purple slice, about $16.4 million, is the parking lot. As we mentioned, there's about $20.6 million in items under consideration that we would talk about in January. It's important to point out, Mark showed about $1.7 million of funding that had been allocated for broadband should we need it. That 1.7 has basically been swept into this purple slice. So Any additional funds for broadband would then be added to that 20.6 million. So that, that'd have to be considered, in the future. Any questions on that?
Commissioner, anything?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So you're saying that 1.6 that he just showed us just automatically got swept into the parking lot, and we didn't consider just kind of keeping it there to go for some BEAD funding? Or just-
Basically, yes.
Okay.
You could pull it out as another little slice like the yellow one there, but it's kind of basically all in the same bucket. One thing, that 20.6 million does still assume $10 million for behavioral health phase 2. So that sort of inflates it a little bit.
And just to add, for the sake of folks who may be listening, and probably for my sake, so the purple and there's basically $16.4 million there, and we'll be discussing, deliberating on $20.6 million in requests or potential
Correct.
use of that money. Is that correct, sir?
Yes.
Okey-doke.
And it's important, yep, plus broadband. And it's important to note that should some of that be allocated to broadband, it would come back in later years and then could be reallocated. So it's kind of, you can almost use it twice, if you will.
Thank you.
Commissioner, thank you for pointing that out, because I know none of the requests we have that are part of the 20.6 million are frivolous requests from the community. Everything is worthwhile. People have real needs in our community, but the resources are limited, and those will be difficult decisions. Some folks will hear no, or we can't fund completely your request, and so we'll take more time to have those discussions so that you all can, the three of you can deliberate about where those funds should be allocated.
Thank you for those comments, Lorinda. Please proceed. Oh, hold off a second.
I just thank you, Mr. Chair. I just want to reiterate, I think that our progress with broadband and the money that we've invested, and I hope that we continue with this BEAD money, is money that we're getting to, with the return on investment and paying back, we're going to get to spend twice. So this has been money that we have invested for the really important connection in our community that is an equity issue, but also now we'll, in the next years to come, we'll be able to use that funding again. And I think that's a really important point, and I think it was a really good decision on our part as a board. And I just wanted to kind of point that out again, because I do think as we try to continue this progress, we still have a lot of households that are not served. Thank you.
So the next couple of charts are fairly simple. This is the one I'm most excited about, which is that all of the direct reimbursement, $8.1 million, has been spent, and so we are done with that. The local assistance, it should be LATCF, sorry, Local Assistance Tribal Consistency Fund plus interest adds up to about $2.8 million. That has been allocated to the Fleet Campus project, and as I understand, it should be spent this year. As far as year-to-date non-recyclable expenses, thus far we've spent about $6.6 million on transformative projects, $5.7 million on broadband, just over $3 million on immediate needs grants, $2.1 million of the just over $3.3 million for community corrections renovation has gone out the door. And then the rest of these projects are done, and so they haven't changed. And so thus far, we've spent about $25.3 million. Next steps, the next work session will be scheduled for April. That's our quarterly basis. As we've mentioned, the retreat to discuss these parking lot issues will be on the 30th. We will then also calculate the lost revenue for the last calendar year in April or May once the books are closed. And that will be the final reportable expense to the Treasury Department. And that concludes the presentation.
Excellent, Josh. Thank you. Commissioner Shaddock McNally, do you have any further questions, comments, observations, please?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I just want to say thank you, Josh, and thank you to your team once again. I keep saying our gratitude, but this has been above and beyond your duties as assigned, but this has been a phenomenal once in a lifetime opportunity to really address some of the needs in our community that we may never have had the chance to do. And so I think I feel very good about the allocations and the direction we've taken, and that we have, I feel like we have really tried to do this countywide, and also just really address some inequities, and some of those communities have been disproportionately impacted. And we couldn't do this without you and Laura Walker, and our partnerships with our municipalities and Bohemian and others, as we have put a lot of time in being thoughtful and reflective on this. And I just want to say congratulations and thank you to all. This is, I think, I'm really proud of this work, and I think we've helped serve a lot of our residents in a lot of different ways. So just heartfelt gratitude. Thank you.
So I have a question, and then also a lot of gratitude, of course. My question is, and actually I have a suggestion too. When we close the books with the U.S. Treasury, it looks like in the second quarter of this year, 2024, what kind of oversight does the county have regarding the money that's out the door, that we have dedicated to various transformative and other kinds of projects? What is the oversight that we have there, sir, to further ensure that the money's being used properly?
Yeah, that's a great question. As far as a lot of those transformative projects go, they have grant agreements with the county, very similar to what they might have had if they were, directly reimbursed by the Treasury Department. Significantly less red tape, but we still require, documentation that they've expended the funds as we've expected or directed. Some of the programs are internal county programs, like the sheriff's medical treatment. We get the invoice for that shows, they're charging us the extra $14,000 a month for the COVID services. So there is a lot of documentation for really all of these. We're not just, writing checks and saying, thanks, we hope it all works out. So yeah, it's a great question. So we're making sure that happens.
Thanks, Josh. So I'll express a few accolades, but basically I want to say thank you for lots of reasons that have been stated and that we've tried to be supportive throughout the process. I think the commitment that you and your team and the various teams to the really important values that we have here at the county, accountability and transparency with how we use the public funds. I think we've done our best to abide by those principles and values, so thank you for that. My suggestion is that we may want to do some kind of a celebration, take you out to lunch or something, once we close the books with the Treasury, or so that's something to think about. The work keeps on going, and we have to make important decisions, but I would think it would be wise to pause and just give thanks and maybe do a little bit of celebration. Do you think that's a good idea, Josh?
Definitely, I won't turn down lunch. And you're right, we should celebrate and make clear to the community all the work that we've done and that they've done with these funds. We did a little bit of that with the immediate needs grants. We had a lot of the grantees come and explain their projects. I think it would also be a good idea to create a report of some kind showing where all the funds went, kind of an after the fact. We get asked that occasionally, and it's important. And as you mentioned, for transparency's sake, here's all the good things that we did with it. There are other communities that aren't putting these dollars to use like we are. And so, yeah, I think that'd be really valuable.
Excellent. And I'm sure that report would identify and describe how these investments, how these funds have made meaningful differences in people's lives, businesses, and so forth. So thank you. Before we adjourn, Lorinda, is there anything else you'd like to say or close us out with before we adjourn?
Yes, I would. Being gone a week and coming back, and then coming back to this report, it makes me really proud to be part of this community. So the county received, looking at Josh's table, $72.1 million in fiscal, state and local fiscal recovery funds. Some communities just offset their expenses and let that be that. And as I was listening to all the reports and all the things happening, in addition to dealing with our internal needs that were directly related to the pandemic, things like the medical contract at the jail and those kind of things, you all have used these funds to maintain public assets in natural resources and in community corrections. You've supported immediate needs in the community to the tune of, $8 million. You've invested in transformational community projects, and I know we're still in the process of wrapping that one up. And you've invested in infrastructure for our rural residents who didn't have access to things like broadband. Look at what you've done with this money and what other communities have done. The idea of a report is really exciting because I think not everyone can say that their elected bodies have chosen to spend these funds in the way that you all have in a very thoughtful and considered way. So thank you for that. You've provided really clear guidance to us. These work sessions are helpful for us and for the community, and we hope for you as well. So I think there's a lot of congratulations to go around, the technical piece and then the policy piece. I think it's been a really great team getting these dollars out into the community.
Thanks, Loretta, and I'm very glad that I asked you to make some closing comments, very affirming comments. Also want to do a shout out for our Assistant County Manager. I mean, we have a great strategic leadership team, and she's a part of this puzzle, and so she merits, she deserves a shout out. So with that, at 11:06 a.m., yes, Commissioner.
I'm sorry, Mr. Chair, but I think that was a fine suggestion you made. I know we have the website, Josh, that has got these ongoing reports and stories. And I've always been saying if we don't tell our story, someone else will, and we may not like the story they tell. But I think if we could, if some of these folks some of these projects get maybe some, like interview Mark or interview some folks and get some storytelling on there as well as the report. I think it's great to have a report, but I think also hearing from folks like Sylvandale or some of these small businesses that have been impacted, or the transformational project, maybe Matthew's House talking about the youth shelter or the mobile home residents. I think having some of them, if they're willing to tell their story, I think would be really great to document on the website that's already there, so that we, for the next few years to come, when people come back and say, how did you spend that money? We can have, we have that there and for future boards to refer back to. So thank you. Just a suggestion as well.
Great. Thank you very much. At 11:07 a.m., we will adjourn. And thanks also to our broadcasting team, Cassidy and Company, that helps to make things even more transparent. Thank you all. Have a good day.